Jake called an emergency crew meeting after Commander Vexler and his soldiers left the ship. Everyone gathered in the small common area that served as their dining room and meeting space. The atmosphere was tense as they waited for an explanation of what had just happened in the galley. Lisa sat at the table with her hands folded in front of her. For the first time since joining the crew, she was not trying to maintain her servant posture. Her back was straight, and her eyes were alert as she studied each face around the table. "I think it is time for the truth," Jake said simply. "We all saw what happened with the consortium inspection. We know you are not who you claimed to be when you joined this crew." Lisa nodded slowly. "You are right, Captain. I have been lying to all of you about my identity and my background. But I had good reasons for maintaining that deception." Tony leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of reasons? The kind that could get everyone in this room killed if the wrong people learned the truth," Lisa replied. "My real name is Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Harper of the Terran Defense Corps' Deep Operations Division." The room fell completely silent. Jake felt his world shift as he tried to process what she had just told them. The Terran Defense Corps was supposed to be a myth. Earth government claimed that humanity had never developed serious military capabilities, and that all defense forces were limited to local system patrol duties. "That is impossible," Amy said quietly. "Earth does not have a military." The consortium made sure of that when they integrated human worlds into their territory. Lisa smiled grimly. That is what they were supposed to believe. 23 years ago, Earth leadership realized that humanity needed to prepare for the possibility that our peaceful integration into consortium space might not last forever. We began secretly developing advanced military technology and training elite operatives to infiltrate alien societies. She stood up and began pacing around the small room as she continued her explanation. The Deep Operations Division was tasked with placing trained soldiers throughout consortium territory. We would blend into human civilian populations and gather intelligence while establishing networks that could be activated if humanity ever needed to defend itself. Jake tried to understand the implications of what she was telling them. How many operatives were placed? Originally, we deployed 150 soldiers across 47 star systems. Each operative was given a cover identity and assigned to gather intelligence on specific aspects of consortium military and political structure. "What happened to them?" Tony asked. Lisa's expression darkened. "The program was betrayed from within. Someone in Earth leadership provided information about our operations to consortium intelligence services. Most of the operatives were captured or killed within 6 months of the betrayal," she returned to her seat at the table and looked directly at Jake. "I was one of the survivors. I managed to escape the initial purge by assuming a new identity and disappearing into the population of domestic workers that serve alien families throughout the galaxy." Amy spoke up from across the table. "How long have you been hiding?" 20 years, Lisa replied. 20 years of watching humanity be reduced to a servant species while I pretended to be exactly what the aliens expected me to be. 20 years of waiting for a chance to contact other survivors and rebuild our network. Jake was beginning to understand the scope of what Lisa had endured. "You have been alone all this time." "Not completely alone. I knew that other operatives had survived because I occasionally saw signs of their work. An accident that was too convenient to be natural. A system failure that helped humans more than it hurt aliens. Small acts of sabotage that only trained soldiers would know how to execute." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard communication unit. "This contains encrypted codes that were designed to contact surviving operatives. I have been afraid to use it because any transmission could be traced by consortium intelligence." Tony examined the device when she handed it to him. "Why are you willing to risk it now?" "Because after what happened with Commander Vexler of the consortium knows that someone with military training is operating in their territory. They will begin a systematic search for other operatives, whether I contact them or not. At least this way we can coordinate our response instead of being picked off one by one." Jake made his decision. Do it. Contact the other survivors. Lisa activated the device and began entering a complex sequence of codes. The process took several minutes as she navigated through multiple security protocols that were designed to prevent detection. Finally, a soft chime indicated that the transmission was complete. Now we wait, she said. If any other operatives are still alive and monitoring the emergency frequencies, they should respond within 24 hours. The first response came 6 hours later, then another an hour after that. By the end of the day, Lisa had received confirmation signals from 43 surviving operatives scattered across consortium space. Jake watched her face as she read the incoming messages. There was relief there, but also sadness for all the soldiers who had not survived the long years of hiding. 43, he said. That is not very many compared to the original number. It is more than I dared to hope for, Lisa replied. And these are not ordinary soldiers, Captain. Every person who responded to my signal has survived 20 years of deep cover operations in hostile territory. They are among the most highly trained and experienced operatives that humanity has ever produced. Over the next few days, reports began arriving from the scattered network. Each operative had maintained their cover identity while gathering detailed intelligence about their assigned sectors. The combined information provided a comprehensive picture of consortium military capabilities and political weaknesses that no single government agency possessed. Lisa shared some of the reports with Jake and his crew. Matt Johnson had spent 15 years working as a cook aboard the luxury liner Star Grace, while documenting the personal habits and security protocols of high-ranking consortium officials. Beth Stone had mapped every critical system on Nexus Prime during her years as a maintenance worker in the government district. Ray Cooper had been moving between maximum security facilities for over a decade as a janitor while secretly photographing classified documents and recording confidential conversations. Each operative had used their invisible status as human servants to gather information that would have been impossible for traditional spies to obtain. They have been watching everything, Jake said as he reviewed the intelligence reports. Every military base, every government facility, every critical piece of infrastructure in consortium space. That was the plan, Lisa confirmed. Human servants have access to areas that are off limits to everyone else because aliens see us as furniture. We are present, but not important enough to worry about. Amy looked up from a report she had been reading. Some of these intelligence assessments are incredible. This operative on Kellogg's Prime has detailed floor plans of their military command center and personal information about every senior officer in their fleet. The Kellogg's never suspected that their house cleaner was memorizing classified information while she scrubbed their floors, Lisa said. None of the alien species considered the possibility that humans might be more than we appear to be. Tony shook his head in amazement. 20 years of preparation. How did Earth leadership plan to coordinate all of this intelligence if the program had not been betrayed? Phase 2 was supposed to begin 5 years ago, Lisa explained. All operatives would have been contacted simultaneously and given orders to begin active operations against consortium infrastructure. The goal was to create enough disruption to force a negotiated settlement that would give humanity equal status in the galaxy. What stopped it from happening? The betrayal destroyed our command structure on Earth. Without central coordination, the operatives had no choice but to remain in deep cover and wait for new orders that never came. Jake was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were dealing with. But now you can coordinate independently. Yes, Lisa said. We have the intelligence networks and the trained personnel to begin operations without waiting for Earth to rebuild their command structure. The question is whether we should. She looked around the table at Jake and his crew. Once we begin active resistance, there will be no going back. The consortium will know that humanity has been deceiving them for 20 years. They will respond with overwhelming force to crush any rebellion before it can spread. Jake thought about everything that had happened since Lisa joined his crew. The rescue at Omega 7, the confrontation with Commander Vexler, the revelation that humans have been preparing for this moment for decades while pretending to be helpless servants. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Lisa was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I recommend that we begin with small coordinated actions that will test consortium response capabilities while demonstrating to other humans that resistance is possible. If we succeed, we can gradually escalate to larger operations. And if we fail, then humanity will remain a servant species for the foreseeable future," she said simply. "But at least we will have tried to change our situation instead of accepting it." Word traveled fast through the underground networks that connected human workers across the galaxy. Within days of the Omega-7 rescue operation, Jake began receiving coded messages from contacts he had not heard from in years. The messages all asked the same basic questions about his new crew member and how she had managed to organize such an effective rescue mission. Jake realized that Lisa had done more than save 37 lives. She had sent a signal to every human in consortium space that someone was willing to fight back against alien oppression. The rescue had been too professional and too successful to be the work of ordinary civilians. People were starting to wonder who Lisa really was. The New Horizon was 3 days out from Omega-7 when they received an official communication from Consortium Security Command. The message was brief and direct. Commander Vexler of the Throne Guard would be conducting a routine inspection of their vessel at the next available port. Failure to comply would result in immediate seizure of ship and crew. Jake had dealt with consortium inspections before, but they were usually conducted by low-level bureaucrats looking for smuggled goods or immigration violations. The Throne Guard was different. They were the elite military unit that handled threats to consortium security, and they did not waste time on routine inspections. "They know something," Tony said grimly as they reviewed the inspection order on the bridge. "The timing is too convenient to be coincidence." Amy agreed with his assessment. "Commander Vexler has a reputation for being thorough and ruthless. If he is coming here personally, then they suspect we are involved in something serious." Jake looked at Lisa, who had been standing quietly near the bridge entrance during their discussion. She had maintained her normal servant demeanor since returning from the mining station, but Jake could see tension in her posture that had not been there before. "Lisa, do you have any idea why Consortium Security would be interested in our ship?" he asked. "No, sir," she replied in her usual polite tone. "Perhaps they are investigating the rescue operation at Omega-7. It was a reasonable explanation, but Jake noticed that she avoided making eye contact when she answered. He was becoming convinced that Lisa knew exactly why the Throne Guard was coming, and that she was more worried about the inspection than she was admitting. They docked Meridian Station 2 days later. The facility was a major trading hub that served dozens of star systems, and it was crawling with consortium security personnel. Jake could see patrol ships stationed around the docking area and armed guards at every checkpoint. Commander Vexler arrived within an hour of their docking. He was a tall Drakmarian with silver skin and the ceremonial scars that marked him as a veteran warrior. His black uniform carried the insignia of the Throne Guard, and he was accompanied by 6 elite soldiers who looked like they could handle any resistance they might encounter. "Captain Miller," Vexler said as he boarded the ship, "I am here to conduct a security inspection of your vessel and crew. You will provide full cooperation or face the consequences." Jake nodded and tried to appear calm, even though his heart was racing. "Of course, Commander. We have nothing to hide." "We shall see," Vexler replied. "I am particularly interested in your newest crew member, the human female who joined your ship at the Zephyrian Trade Hub." Jake felt his stomach drop. They were definitely here because of Lisa. Somehow Consortium Security had connected her to the rescue operation, and they wanted to know more about her background and capabilities. "Lisa is a domestic worker," Jake said carefully. "She helps with cooking and cleaning duties aboard the ship." Vexler smiled with an expression that showed far too many sharp teeth. "Domestic workers do not typically organize complex rescue operations or disable armed security personnel. I think your crew member has skills that are not mentioned in her official records." The inspection began in the cargo hold and worked its way through every section of the ship. The Throne Guard soldiers were thorough and professional as they searched for hidden compartments or contraband materials. But Jake could tell that they were really looking for evidence that would reveal Lisa's true identity. Lisa maintained her servant role throughout the inspection. She answered questions politely and demonstrated her normal cleaning and cooking duties when asked. But Jake noticed that Vexler was studying her with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Your domestic skills are impressive," the commander said as he watched Lisa prepare food in the galley. "Tell me about your previous employment." "I have worked for several families, Commander," Lisa replied without looking up from her cooking. "The Vorthik merchant Grimlock was my most recent employer before joining this crew. And before Grimlock, various positions, sir. I prefer not to discuss previous employers without their permission." Vexler moved closer to where Lisa was working. "Perhaps you would prefer to discuss your knowledge of consortium, military protocols." Lisa paused in her food preparation for just a moment before continuing. "I do not understand, sir." "I have no knowledge of military matters." "Really?" Vexler said. "Then perhaps you can explain how you knew the access codes for the emergency systems at Omega 7. Those codes are classified information that only authorized personnel should possess." Jake felt cold fear run through him. He had not known that Lisa had used classified access codes during the rescue operation. If that was true, then she had knowledge that went far beyond anything a civilian should have. "I found the codes written on a maintenance panel," Lisa said calmly. "Many facilities leave emergency information posted for safety reasons. The codes at Omega 7 were changed 3 days before your rescue operation. They were not posted anywhere on the station. The only way you could have known them was through classified consortium databases." The galley fell silent. Jake could see that Vexler had laid a trap, and Lisa had walked directly into it. There was no innocent explanation for how she could have known current classified access codes. Lisa sat down her cooking utensils and turned to face the commander. When she did, Jake saw that her entire demeanor had changed. The submissive posture was gone. The polite tone was replaced by something harder and more direct. "You are very thorough, Commander," she said quietly. "But you are also making some dangerous assumptions. The only assumption I am making is that you are not who you pretend to be," Vexler replied. "I think you are a trained operative with access to classified information. I think you are part of a network that has been hidden among the human civilian population." Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "And what if I am?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake could feel the tension in the room increase as the two faced each other. Vexler's hand moved closer to his weapon, while his soldiers shifted into more alert positions. "If you are, then you will be taken into custody for interrogation," the commander said. "The consortium has ways of extracting information from uncooperative subjects. You could try," Lisa said. "But I think you would find the experience educational." What happened next occurred so quickly that Jake almost missed it. Vexler reached for his weapon, but Lisa was already moving. She struck his wrist with a precise blow that sent the gun flying across the galley. Before the commander could react, she had spun behind him and applied a chokehold that left him gasping for breath. Throne Guard soldiers tried to intervene, but Lisa was ready for them. She used Vexler as a shield while delivering strikes that disabled their weapons and left them struggling to maintain their footing. Within seconds, she had 3 elite warriors on the deck and their commander pinned against the galley wall. "Listen carefully," Lisa said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "I am going to release you, and you are going to leave this ship. You will report that your inspection found nothing of interest and that the crew of the New Horizon is exactly what they appear to be. You cannot threaten a consortium commander." Vexler gasped. "I am not threatening you," Lisa replied calmly. "I am giving you a chance to walk away from something that you do not understand. There are forces in this galaxy that your government does not know about. Forces that have been watching and waiting for the right moment to act." She released her hold on Vexler and stepped back. The commander rubbed his throat and glared, her with obvious fury, but he did not try to attack again. His soldiers were slowly getting back to their feet, but they looked shaken by how easily they had been defeated. "This is not over," Vexler said as he straightened his uniform. "The consortium will learn the truth about you and your network." "Perhaps," Lisa agreed, "but not today. And Commander, when you make your report, I suggest you mention that humanity is not as helpless as your government believes. Some of us have been preparing for this conversation for a very long time." Vexler stared at her for a long moment before turning to his soldiers. "We are leaving," he announced. This inspection is complete. After they were gone, Jake found himself alone with Lisa in the galley. She had returned to her normal food preparation, as if nothing had happened, but he could see that she was no longer pretending to be a simple servant. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. Lisa looked at him with those intelligent eyes that he was finally beginning to understand. "Someone who has been waiting 20 years for the right." The distress signal reached a new horizon while they were hauling grain supplies to the frontier colonies. Amy picked up the transmission on the emergency frequencies and immediately called Jake to the bridge. The message was weak and filled with static, but the words were clear enough to understand. "This is Mining Station Omega-7 requesting immediate assistance. We have 37 human workers trapped in collapsed tunnel section C7. Kellogg's overseers refuse to authorize rescue operations. Please respond if anyone can hear this transmission." Jake felt his stomach tighten as he listened to the message. Repeat. Mining Station Omega-7 was owned by the Kellogg's mining consortium and had a reputation for treating human workers worse than equipment. The Kellogg's were a brutal species that valued productivity over safety, and they saw human deaths as acceptable losses in their pursuit of profits. "How far are we from their location?" Jake asked Amy. 6 hours at maximum burn," she replied. "But, sir, that is Kellogg's territory. They do not welcome uninvited visitors." Jake knew she was right. Getting involved in Kellogg's operations was dangerous for independent human ships. The aliens had powerful friends in the consortium government, and they did not hesitate to use violence against anyone who interfered with their business interests. But 37 people were trapped and dying while their overseers refused to help them. "Set course for Omega-7, Jake ordered. "We cannot just ignore this." Tony appeared on the bridge as they changed course toward the mining station. His face was grim as he listened to Jake explain the situation. "The Kellogg's will not appreciate us showing up uninvited," he said. "They might decide to shoot first and ask questions later. Then we will have to be careful about how we approach them," Jake replied. Lisa had been standing quietly near the bridge entrance during the conversation. Jake had noticed that she often appeared whenever there was trouble, even though no one had called for her. She seemed to have an instinct for knowing when the crew needed extra help. "Sir," she said softly, "perhaps I could assist with the rescue operation." Jake turned to look at her with surprise. "This is going to be dangerous, Lisa. The Kellogg's do not treat humans well under the best of circumstances. If they are refusing to help their own workers, they certainly will not want outsiders getting involved." "I understand, sir, but I have experience working in confined spaces. I might be able to help reach the trapped workers." There was something in her tone that suggested she knew more about rescue operations than she was admitting. Jake had learned to pay attention when Lisa made suggestions because she had not been wrong yet about anything important. The approach to Omega-7 took them through an asteroid field that the Kellogg's used to hide their mining operations from. Casual observation. The station was built into a large asteroid that had been hollowed out to create living and working spaces. Multiple tunnel systems extended deep into the rock where automated mining equipment extracted valuable minerals. Jake tried to contact the station as they approached, but received only a terse response from the Kellogg's administrator in charge. "This is a private facility. You are not authorized to dock here. Depart immediately or face defensive action." "We received a distress call about trapped workers," Jake replied. "We are here to offer assistance with rescue operations. No assistance required. This is an internal labor issue. Depart now." Jake ended the communication and turned to his crew. The Kellogg's were clearly not going to cooperate with any rescue attempt. But the distress signal was still broadcasting, which meant that people were still alive in the collapsed tunnels. "We need to find another way to help them," he said. Lisa stepped forward from where she had been listening to the conversation. "Sir, I believe I can reach the trapped workers through the maintenance systems. Most mining stations have service tunnels that connect to all major areas for equipment access." "How do you know about mining station layouts?" Amy asked. Lisa hesitated for just a moment before answering. "I have worked in many different facilities. Miss Amy, you learn things about how they are constructed." Jake studied her face and once again had the feeling that she was not telling them the complete truth. But her knowledge had been helpful before, and they needed all the help they could get right now. "What would you need to attempt a rescue?" he asked. "Access to the station and a way to avoid the Kellogg security patrols. I would also need basic rescue equipment and medical supplies for the injured workers." Tony spoke up from his position at the engineering station. "I could create a distraction with the ship systems. Make it look like we are having engine trouble and need emergency docking. Privileges? That might get us close enough to the station for Lisa to slip aboard." Amy nodded her agreement. "I can put us near one of the maintenance airlocks while Tony is talking to their administrators. If Lisa moves quickly, she might be able to get inside before they realize what is happening." Jake made his decision. "Do it, but Lisa, be very careful in there. If the Kellogg's catch you, they will not be gentle about asking questions." The plan worked better than Jake had expected. Tony convinced the station administrators that the New Horizon was experiencing critical engine failure and needed immediate docking assistance. While the Kellogg's were focused on the supposed emergency, Amy maneuvered the ship close enough to a maintenance airlock for Lisa to transfer across. Jake watched through the ship's external cameras as Lisa moved across the gap between the ship and the station. She was wearing a basic environmental suit and carrying a small pack of rescue equipment. Her movements were confident and precise as she opened the maintenance airlock and disappeared into the station. What happened next surprised everyone aboard. The New Horizon. Lisa did not simply search for the trapped workers. Instead, she seemed to know exactly where she was going. She moved through the maintenance tunnels with an efficiency that suggested detailed knowledge of the station layout. Within 20 minutes, she had reached the collapsed section and begun organizing the rescue operation. Jake monitored her progress through a small communication device that she had taken with her. Her voice was calm and professional as she assessed the situation and began directing the trapped workers in their own rescue efforts. "The main support beam is cracked but stable," she reported. "I can create a bypass route through the service tunnel that connects to Section C5. We need to move the injured workers first and then clear the debris blocking the main exit." "How do you know which tunnel connects to C5? Jake asked. "I found a schematic display, sir. Mining stations use standard layouts for safety reasons." Jake accepted the explanation, but he was becoming more convinced that Lisa had skills and knowledge that went far beyond what any domestic servant should possess. She was conducting a complex rescue operation with the confidence of someone who had done similar work before. The rescue took 3 hours to complete. Lisa guided 37 workers through maintenance tunnels to safety points where Jake's crew could extract them from the station. Several of the workers were injured and needed medical attention, but all of them were alive. The Kellogg's finally realized what was happening when the first group of rescue workers appeared at an emergency airlock. Security guards rushed to stop the rescue operation, but they were too late. Lisa had already moved most of the workers to safety and was preparing to extract the final group. That was when things became dangerous. "Unknown human in Section D7, a Kellogg's voice announced over the station communication system. Surrender immediately or face lethal force." Jake tried to contact Lisa, but received no response. The communication device had either been damaged or she had turned it off to avoid detection. He could only wait and hope that she would find a way to escape before the security guards found her. 10 minutes later, Lisa's voice came through the ship's communication system. New Horizon, this is Lisa. I am at Emergency Airlock 12 with the final group of workers. Request immediate extraction. Jake felt relief flood through him as Amy maneuvered the ship to the extraction point. But his relief turned to shock when he saw Lisa emerge from the airlock. She was moving differently than before. Her posture was alert and combat-ready rather than submissive. She carried herself like a soldier rather than a servant. Behind her came the last group of rescued workers. But Jake also saw something else that made his blood run cold. 3 Kellogg security guards were lying unconscious in the corridor behind the airlock. Their weapons had been removed and their communication equipment destroyed. Lisa had not just rescued the workers. She had fought her way through armed guards to complete the mission. When she came aboard the ship, Jake met her at the airlock. She was back to her normal demeanor, as if nothing unusual had happened. But Jake had seen the unconscious guards, and he knew that domestic servants did not have the skills to disable armed security personnel. Lisa, he said quietly, we need to talk. She looked at him with those intelligent eyes that he was beginning to understand held far more knowledge than she had ever admitted. For a moment, he thought she might finally tell him the truth about who she really was. Yes, sir, she said in her usual polite tone. But first, we should leave this area quickly. The Kellogg's will send ships to pursue us once they realize what happened. Lisa Harper had been aboard the New Horizon for 3 weeks when Tony Walsh first noticed something strange about the fusion drive. He had been expecting the plasma injectors to fail completely any day now, but instead, the engine was running smoother than it had in months. The power output readings were better than they should be with the old equipment, and the fuel consumption had dropped by nearly 15%. Tony scratched his gray beard and stared at the engine diagnostics display. He had been working on Starship engines for 30 years, and he knew when something was not right. Engines did not fix themselves. They especially did not improve their performance without new parts or major overhauls. Yet somehow the fusion drive was running better than it had since Jake bought the ship. He made his way through the narrow maintenance corridors to the main engine compartment. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the day before. The same worn control panels with their flickering displays. The same jury-rig repairs he had made over the years to keep systems running. The same plasma conduits that should have been replaced 2 years ago, but still somehow carried power to the drive cores. The only difference was that everything was cleaner than usual. The deck plates had been scrubbed until they gleamed. The control surfaces were free of the grease and grime that normally accumulated despite regular cleaning. Even the air in the compartment smelled fresher. Somehow, Tony had assumed that Lisa was just being thorough in her cleaning duties. She had volunteered to help maintain the ship, and Jake had assigned her to work with Tony in the engine room. Most of the crew appreciated having someone take care of the tedious cleaning tasks that they normally had to do themselves between cargo runs, but engines did not run better just because they were clean. Tony was sure he was missing something important, but he could not figure out what it was. On the bridge, Amy Brooks was having her own puzzling experience with the ship's navigation systems. She had been plotting their next jump to the Kepler station when she discovered that someone had already calculated the optimal route. The work was done with a precision that surprised her because the calculations took into account variables that she usually ignored to save time. The flight plan showed micro-adjustments for stellar drift that would save them nearly 6 hours of travel time. It included alternate routes in case they encountered shipping traffic or needed to avoid patrol ships. Most impressive was a fuel optimization profile that would reduce their consumption by almost 20% without affecting their arrival. Scheduled. Amy had been piloting ships for 8 years, and she knew good navigation work when she saw it. This was very good work, better than what she usually produced herself. The problem was that she had no idea who had done it. She checked the navigation, computer's access logs, but found nothing unusual. According to the records, no one had used the system between her last session and this morning when she found the completed calculations. Yet someone had clearly spent hours working on the flight plan. Sometime during the night shift, Amy walked through the ship looking for whoever might have helped with the navigation work. Most of the crew was asleep or off duty. Jake was in his cabin reviewing cargo manifests for their next job. Tony was in the engine room, muttering about mysterious improvements to the fusion drive. Lisa was in the galley preparing breakfast for the crew. "Lisa," Amy called as she entered the small kitchen area. "Did you use the navigation computer last night?" Lisa looked up from the food preparation counter where she was cutting vegetables. "For breakfast, no, Miss Brooks. I would not know how to use such equipment. I only know cooking and cleaning." Her tone was polite and deferential in the way that servants were trained to speak to their superiors. But Amy noticed that Lisa's knife work was exceptionally precise. She cut the vegetables into perfectly uniform pieces without looking at what she was doing. Her movements were efficient and controlled in a way that suggested training beyond simple food preparation. "Call me Amy," she said. "We do not stand on formality here." "Yes, Miss Amy," Lisa replied. "Is there something wrong with the navigation system?" "No, nothing wrong. Someone did some excellent work on our flight plan." "I was trying to figure out who deserves the credit." Lisa returned her attention to the vegetables. "Perhaps one of the other crew members helped while you were sleeping." Amy nodded, but she was not satisfied with the explanation. She had asked everyone else, and none of them had the skills or knowledge to do navigation calculations. Jake could plot basic jump coordinates, but nothing as sophisticated as what she had found. Tony was brilliant with engines, but he rarely worked with navigation systems. The rest of the crew handled cargo and maintenance duties. 2 days later, they encountered pirates. The attack happened while they were transiting through the Outer Rim territories where shipping lanes were poorly patrolled. 3 small raider ships appeared on their sensors and immediately began jamming communications. Jake called for battle stations, but everyone knew that the New Horizon was not equipped for combat. They had basic shields and no weapons beyond. A single defensive laser that barely qualified as a deterrent. "They are targeting the civilian transport Star Merchant," Amy reported from the pilot station. "Looks like a passenger liner with minimal defenses." Jake watched the tactical display as the pirate ships closed in on their target. The Star Merchant was larger than the New Horizon, but it was built for comfort, not speed. It would not be able to outrun the raiders, and it had no weapons to fight them off. "Standard procedure is to avoid engagement," Jake said grimly. "We cannot help them without getting ourselves killed." The bridge fell silent as they watched the attack develop. Everyone knew that Jake was right. Getting involved would only result in 2 destroyed ships instead of 1. But it still felt wrong to watch innocent people get slaughtered without trying to help. "Sir," Lisa said quietly from behind them. Jake turned to see her standing in the bridge doorway. She should not have been there during battle stations, but he was too focused on the tactical situation to send her away. "What is it, Lisa?" "The raiders are using a standard pincer formation. If we approach from bearing 27 Mark V and used our drive flare to create a sensor shadow, we might be able to disrupt their attack pattern long enough for the transport to escape." The bridge went completely quiet. Everyone stared at Lisa with surprise. Her suggestion was tactically sound and showed an understanding of space combat that no civilian should possess. Jake found himself studying her face more carefully than he had before. "That is a very specific recommendation," he said slowly. Lisa seemed to realize that she had said something she should not have. Her posture shifted back to the submissive stance that she normally maintained. "I apologize, sir. I should not have spoken out of turn." But Jake was already turning to Amy. "Can you execute that maneuver?" "Yes, sir." "It will be risky, but it might work." "Do it." The next few minutes were the most intense that any of them had experienced in years. Amy flew the New Horizon through a complex approach that used their exhaust trail to mask their presence from pirate sensors. When they emerged from the sensor shadow, they were close enough to the raider formation to disrupt their attack pattern without coming within range of serious weapons. The maneuver worked perfectly. The pirates were forced to break off their attack, and the civilian transport escaped into hyperspace. The raiders decided that pursuing a single cargo ship was not worth the effort and disappeared back into the asteroid field, where they had been hiding. Jake found Lisa in the galley after the excitement was over. She was back to her normal routine of cleaning and food preparation as if nothing had happened. But Jake had seen her face during the tactical discussion, and he knew that she was hiding something important. "That was good advice you gave us," he said. "Thank you, sir," Lisa replied without looking up from her work. "I am glad I could help. Where did you learn about space combat tactics?" Lisa paused in her cleaning for just a moment before continuing. "I have served on many ships, sir." "You observed things over the years." It was a reasonable explanation, but Jake did not believe it. Domestic servants did not learn tactical analysis from casual observation. They especially did not develop the kind of detailed knowledge that Lisa had demonstrated. There was something about her background that she was not telling them. Over the following days, Jake began paying closer attention to Lisa's behavior. He noticed that she moved through the ship with an efficiency that suggested familiarity with starship layouts. She avoided waste in everything she did, from food preparation to cleaning supplies. Her work was always completed faster and better than expected. Most telling were the small things that she tried to hide. Jake caught her studying the ship's technical manuals when she thought no one was watching. She sometimes muttered calculations under her breath while she worked. Once he found her examining the defensive systems display with an intensity that suggested professional interest rather than casual curiosity. Tony reported that the engine improvements were continuing. Systems that should have been failing were somehow running better than ever. Amy discovered more navigation work that had been completed during night shift when the computer access logs showed no activity. The crew began to suspect that their new member was more than she. Jake Miller stood at the viewport of his cargo ship and watched the massive Zephyrian trade hub grow larger in the distance. The spinning metal structure looked like a giant wheel with thousands of lights flickering across its surface. Ships of all sizes moved in and out of its docking bays like busy insects around the hive. Most of those ships belonged to alien species that had money and power. His ship was different. His ship carried humans who worked for whoever would pay them. The New Horizon was not much to look at. The hull had patches welded over holes from micrometeor impacts. The paint had faded from bright blue to a dull gray over the years. Jake had bought the ship with borrowed money 5 years ago when he thought hauling cargo between star systems would make him rich. He learned quickly that humans got the jobs nobody else wanted. They cleaned waste systems on mining stations. They scrubbed floors in alien mansions. They loaded and unloaded cargo in dangerous spaceports where other species would not go. Jake walked through the narrow corridors of his ship toward the bridge. His crew was small, but they worked hard. Tony Walsh kept the fusion drive running, even when parts were impossible to find. Amy Brooks could pilot through asteroid fields that would scare veteran spacers. The rest of his people did whatever jobs they could get. They all knew the truth about humans in this galaxy. The aliens saw them as useful servants and nothing more. The bridge was cramped with outdated equipment that Jake had bought secondhand from scrap dealers. Amy sat at the pilot station watching the approach vectors displayed on her screen. She was young, but she had good instincts for flying. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same worn coveralls that everyone on the ship used for work clothes. "Docking request approved for Base 77 Alpha," Amy said without looking away from her instruments. "They want us to bring the medical supplies to Warehouse District 12 within 4 hours of docking." Jake nodded and checked the cargo manifest on his datapad. 3 tons of basic medical supplies that would sell for enough to buy fuel and food for another month. It was not much, but it would keep them flying. That was all Jake could ask for these days. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. The New Horizon settled into its assigned bay with a soft thud that Jake felt through the deck plates. Outside the viewport, he could see aliens moving around the dock area. tall blue-skinned Zephyrians with their elegant robes and proud bearing, short gray Kellogg's workers with their heavy equipment and bad tempers. A few other species that Jake recognized but could not name. Tony appeared on the bridge, wiping grease from his hands with an old cloth. He was older than the rest of the crew, with gray in his beard and lines around his eyes. He had worked on ships longer than Jake had been alive, and he knew engines better than anyone Jake had ever met. "Fusion drive is running rough again," Tony said. "We need new plasma injectors, but they cost more than we made on the last 3 runs combined." This was nothing new. The ship always needed repairs they could not afford. Jake had learned to ignore problems until they became critical. It was the only way to stay in business when every job barely paid enough to cover expenses. "Do what you can with spare parts," Jake told him. "We will worry about major repairs when we have more money." Tony shrugged and headed back to the engine room. He never complained about working with broken equipment. None of the crew complained much about anything. They all understood their situation. In this galaxy, Jake left Amy to handle the shutdown procedures and made his way to the cargo hold. The medical supplies were packed in standard shipping containers that would require a hover cart to move. The warehouse district was a 15-minute walk from the docking bay, but Jake wanted to scout the route first. Some spaceports were safe for humans to walk around alone. Others were not. The main corridor of the trade hub was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side. The ceiling stretched up 3 stories and was covered with advertisements in a dozen alien languages. The air smelled like ozone and exotic spices from worlds Jake had never seen. Crowds of aliens moved in both directions, conducting business or heading to their ships. Jake had walked about halfway to the warehouse district when he heard raised voices coming from a side passage. He almost kept walking because getting involved in alien disputes was usually a bad idea for humans. But something about the tone made him pause and listen more carefully. "The contract says 2 more years of service," a deep voice was saying in heavily accented human language. "You belong to me until then. Please, Master Grimlock," a female human voice replied. "I have served your family well. I ask only for fair treatment." Jake moved closer to the passage entrance and peered around the corner. A large vortex stood facing the human woman. The vortex was nearly 7 feet tall with purple skin and 4 arms. His expensive robe showed that he had money and status. The woman was smaller and younger, with dark hair and simple clothes that marked her as a domestic servant. "Fair treatment," the vortex repeated with what might have been laughter. "You are property. You get food and shelter. That is more than fair for your kind." Jake knew he should walk away. Getting involved would only cause trouble for him and his crew. But he had seen too many humans treated badly by aliens who thought they owned them. The woman stood with her head down and her hands folded in front of her in the submissive posture that aliens expected from human servants. "The Kellogg's mining operation on Titan 7 needs workers," the vortex continued. "They pay well for strong humans who can work in dangerous conditions. I think you would do well there." The woman's head came up slightly and Jake saw fear flash across her face. Everyone knew about the Kellogg's mining operations. Humans who went there rarely came back. The work was brutal and the overseers did not care if workers lived or died as long as production quotas were met. "Master, please," the woman said quietly. "I will work harder. I will not ask for anything more. Please do not send me to the mines." Vorthik waved one of his hands dismissively. "The decision is made. The Kellogg's transport leaves tomorrow. You will be on it." Jake found himself stepping into the passage before he had time to think about what he was doing. Both the Vorthik and the woman turned to look at him with surprise. "Excuse me," Jake said politely. "I could not help but overhear your conversation." The Vorthic's 4 eyes focused on Jake with obvious irritation. "This is a private matter, human. Move along." "I understand," Jake replied. "But I might have a business proposition for you." This got the alien's attention. Vorthics were merchants above all else, and they rarely turned down a chance to make profit. What kind of proposition? Jake thought quickly. He had very little money, but he knew that Vorthics loved to gamble almost as much as they loved to make deals. I need crew for my ship. Experienced workers are hard to find. Perhaps we could arrange a transfer of her contract. She is worth more to the Kellogg's than you could afford, the Vorthix said flatly. Perhaps, Jake agreed. But are you willing to risk it on a game of chance? The alien's eyes widened slightly. Jake had guessed correctly about the gambling. What do you propose? Starshired. Dice. 1 throw each. High total wins. If you win, I pay you twice what the Kellogg's offered. If I win, the woman's contract transfers to me. The Vorthic considered this for a long moment. Jake could see him calculating the odds and the potential profit. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. But if you lose and cannot pay, I will sell your ship for scrap. They found a neutral party to hold the dice and witness the throws. Jake went first and rolled a total of 11 out of a possible 12. It was a nearly perfect throw. The Vorthix. Confidence faded as he picked up the dice. His throw totaled only 8. The contract is yours, the alien said with obvious displeasure. He handed Jake a datapad with the legal documents. But remember, human, in this galaxy your kind serves. Nothing more. Jake ignored the insult and turned to the woman. She was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. There was gratitude there, but also something else. Something that looked almost like calculation. I can cook, she said quietly in the formal tone that servants used. I can clean. I can be silent. But when Jake looked into her eyes, he saw intelligence there. Sharp, focused intelligence that no servant should possess. There was something about this woman that did not match her humble words and submissive posture. What is? Your name, Jake asked. Lisa Harper, sir. Well, Lisa Harper, Jake said as he opened the door to his ship's future. Welcome to the crew of the New Horizon. I think everything is about to change.